Welcome to the Ego versus EQ and You podcast, where we discuss the key aspects of emotional intelligence and ways to apply it in everyday living. Now let's work together to make common sense more common. Hi, I'm Jen Shirkani. Welcome back to the Ego versus EQ and You podcast. And you might remember in episode 2, we talked about an ego trap on not getting feedback or ignoring feedback. Today, I want to talk about ego trap 2, which is over-relying on technical skills at the expense sometimes of other skills. So maybe putting content a little higher than connection. And I have asked my partner here, Steve Friedlein, to join me for this episode. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Jen.
Great to see you.
Likewise.
So we're going to talk today about emotional intelligence and our tendency sometimes to over-rely on our own technical skills. So maybe I should first just do a quick refresh on what emotional intelligence is. So 3 R's. So the first R is recognizing yourself, knowing your strengths, but also understanding your weaknesses and maybe not overusing those strengths, which is where this trap really comes in, but really being in tune with your personality type or your communication style and your moods. The second part is reading others. So can you plug into someone else and understand them emotionally? Can you read the room? Do you have social awareness to plug into other people? Lastly, can you respond appropriately for a different audience? So choosing a response based on the person or situation that you're in. Those are the 3 R's of EQ. So how does this play in, Steve, to technical skills, do you think?
You know what? Every time we talk about this particular ego trap, I'm reminded of a situation where I worked with 2 individuals that were in help desk support, both highly technically capable. And yet I found it interesting that when people needed assistance, they consistently contacted one person if that person was available versus making contact with the other. And initially I was kind of curious because I hadn't used the help desk myself. So I started kind of taking a closer look at what was happening and asked some questions. And what I learned is that, again, although both of these people were technically capable, one person tended to ask a lot more questions when they went to help someone out. What exactly took place? Help me understand a little more clearly. Give me an example of what was going on. Whereas the other person came in and just started pushing keys and trying to create a solution, which they both came up with solutions. But what happened was when one person went away, the individual really had no idea how to deal with the situation if it came up again. Whereas the other person, who was more self-aware and aware of the audience, was consistently wanting to make sure that person could function more effectively on their own when the help desk people weren't available. And I just thought that was a really great example of people who have the capacity to perform something for someone else, but not delivering in a way that really works out for the audience.
So it's not that technical skills aren't important.
Right.
Clearly they are, right? And in this case, they both had maybe equal technical skills.
Exactly. So I think about this so oftentimes because, you know, you've spoken previously about the importance of knowing your audience. Sometimes we have the benefit of knowing who our audience is going to be. And other times we walk into a room and we don't necessarily know who that group is or how to present to them, which makes our need for reading the audience that much more significant. So it goes back to that recognize, read, and respond that you've mentioned previously.
Yeah, and in this case, it sounds like it really is a differentiator for the one technical person because he's equal in skill level, perhaps, with colleagues, but the difference is he's the one people want to call.
Right. And the skills were ultimately noticed by upper management, and the person that communicated more effectively with the audience has now been promoted and is in a leadership role in that
Uh-huh.
group.
Interesting. Kind of different
Yes.
from how it used to be, because you've been in the workplace as long as I have.
Yes.
And so for so many years, the person who got promoted wasn't necessarily the best leader or had the best leadership skills. It was somebody who was really good at their technical job,
Yeah.
right? The best salesman got promoted to sales leader.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
best help desk technician got promoted to help desk supervisor. So it's nice to see that organizations are recognizing that there's more to this than just technical expertise.
Yeah. And I like to look at it in terms of content and connection. And obviously,
Mm-hmm.
the connection piece was missing. And I think what's important here, too, Jen, is I can't assume that I'll have an opportunity to go through some sort of training to gain these skills once I get promoted into a new position. I
Mm-hmm.
need to start focusing on how I can improve my connection skills right now with the people that surround me, both at work and outside of the workplace.
Yeah, I agree. Because this may not always be about technical skills, meaning I think what we've seen, especially in the coaching work, is we all have a few skills that are so natural to us. Because when we look at EQ, there is a mix of nature and nurture here, right?
Yeah.
There are some skills we're predisposed to have a little bit higher. So they come really naturally to us. And we then have a tendency, I think, to go to them and use them when we're feeling stress or we're wanting to sort of feel like we're in control of something. And so one of the skills that we see overused a lot is problem solving. It's an EQ skill measured on the EQI, but it's a common one that if you're just sort of a natural problem solver, you go right to that. Even when a situation might mean you need to be a listener right now, the other person might need to solve their
Yeah.
own problem in their own way and don't need you to insert yourself into their problem solving.
Exactly. This is really interesting, Jen. I was in a group discussion last night with 5 people that I really didn't know all that well. And at one point, one of them said, "So, Steve, tell me a little bit about the work that you do." Okay.
Okay.
No preparation. It was impromptu. And so I kind of went through that mental process of what do these people really need to know in 1 or 2 sentences? I don't want to go into too much detail, but I need to be able to respond appropriately in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those kinds of things happen all the time where we're called upon to be our authentic selves and
Mm-hmm.
yet make a decision in terms of how we present the information so that it's of interest to the audience, but at the same time provides them the content that they're looking for. And it really struck me last night that this is a moment where I have an opportunity to utilize what we talk about in an unexpected situation.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think, too, we assume a lot of times that technical skills are tied to IQ. And we look at IQ versus EQ quite a bit in our work. And a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago now, there's a pretty long study that's been done by Northwestern University. If you're interested, you can look it up. It's an IQ study. And what they've done is they have studied nearly 400,000 Americans all the way back to the 1930s and tracked IQ scores. And they're standardized IQ tests. Many people have heard of these that have been around since actually World War I, so even decades before this study started. But they noticed, and the data suggests that IQ scores substantially increased from 1932 to 2005. The average was 3 to 5 points per decade. So a lot was going on in America between 1930s and 2005 naturally that might support why IQ would go up, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So things like prenatal care improved quite a bit. You could argue nutrition improved quite a bit. But then they noticed 2006 to 2018, the IQ scores dropped in verbal reasoning, which is logic and vocabulary, matrix reasoning, visual problem solving and analogies, and letter and number series, computational and math. Declined. So, why?
I'm thinking about the way we process information changed dramatically during the period of time you just described. How much information did I have to seek out on my own versus what was available to me, maybe?
Well, what came out in 2006 that suddenly made us not have to think for ourselves? The smartphone, right?
I'm thinking specifically GPS. Okay.
Yes. Oh, for me especially, because I have that spatial reasoning, believe it or not, actually increased for everybody. For me, it decreased. For me, if it could go down, it went down. I'm horrible at a sense of direction or seeing things from above or figuring out what size can fit in another size. That is my weakest by far. But it increased. It was the one out of all the EQ metrics that increased. And I think it's back to technology, honestly. I think it's like the video games, the 3D virtual reality games that you are walking through rooms, and I think it's actually improving spatial ability.
Solving.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the others have all gone down. So, and the thing that was interesting is that the difference was present regardless of age, education, or gender. So I guess we're all getting dumber. I don't know. Sadly. But our clients will tell us they're struggling with employees that are challenged with problem solving in particular, doing their own problem solving. And so they, I think, feel the need to jump in and do a lot of problem solving for others.
Yep. And I think flexibility also has become an issue because people tend to want an immediate response to whatever their need is, and not taking the time to take a closer look at how to resolve certain situations, I think tends to limit our flexibility in terms of how we go about the process of solving problems.
Well, yeah, I think if you have a leader, let's just say you're at work and you have a leader who is high in problem solving and they're quick to want to help, it is so much easier to just go to them and say, hey, what do you think I should do here? Instead of having to figure it out on your own. And so if you're the leader that has a tendency to want to problem solve a lot, you have to work really hard to resist that urge.
Right.
I had one client tell me they had one of the perks at their office was they were actually in office, and they had a food truck that would come one day a week, and the firm would pay for lunch for everybody for the food truck. It was like a perk of theirs. And one day the food truck broke down, and so they notified HR and said, hey, we're not going to make it today. The truck broke down. So they sent an email out to everybody saying, heads up, the truck's not coming today. And one of the HR people said to me, 3 people stopped her in the hall separately and said, what are we supposed to do today for lunch? What are we going to do? The food truck's not here. And she said, I thought they were kidding at first, but they weren't. So we're not talking complex problem solving in some cases. Right. People have just lost the ability to think.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I'm also thinking in terms of, I mentioned flexibility a little bit ago. Mm-hmm. I think people who, going back to that IT example, it's still in my head, of people who are data driven, but on one particular subject. And I think the importance of our ability to stretch ourselves and gain a broader level of competence in different areas so that we can be more interesting to a wider audience of people. I think that's a really significant part of what this ego trap is really all about too.
So breadth of knowledge?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. We all know those people that if you run into them, whether it's at work or away from work, they've got one subject that they love to talk about.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
It may or may not be of interest to you, but that is their area of competence. And the data within that area is what we're going to hear about. And as an audience to that person, I'm looking for something that might be a little closer to what I'm interested in. And that's a struggle. And I think we need to have this consciousness for, am I broadening myself in terms of the way I'm going about communicating to the point where I am seen as being interesting
Hmm.
by more than people that think just like me?
I love it. So have maybe knowing a little bit about a lot of things instead of having this really deep knowledge in one or two things so that you have more to relate to. In a small example, as you know, Steve, I lived in New England for 13 years. And at the time I had young children and I was working a lot, I really didn't spend a lot of time on sports or, kind of cultural stuff in the area. I wasn't originally from New England. But I tell you, I learned before I went to visit a client in Boston, I needed to check and see, did the Patriots win that weekend? Did the Red Sox win? Whoever was playing, whatever season it was, I had to make sure I knew what the situation was with the home team because it's so big in the culture there that it was a great way for me to make small talk with someone and be able, I couldn't talk deep about the games, of course, but at least I had to know if they won or not, right? I could at least say tough loss last night.
Exactly. Well, and I think the same is true if we bring it into the workplace. Do I know about what's going on in other departments other than my own? Do I have an
Hmm.
interest to ask questions about what's going on in another department that might influence what I'm doing, that might give me more credibility or my own department more credibility? And I think that's part of the importance again of not just the content that I'm sharing, but the connectivity that I have not only with one individual, but other groups of people.
Hmm. I agree. And I think, you know, outside of work too, this is also a really important thing. I know when my kids were young, I had a tendency to want to micromanage everything going on at home to the point where, if I'd go out on a business trip, I would make sure that I had all the groceries in the house for my husband. I would have the meals planned, like, here's what you're going to make every night I'm gone. Here's all the groceries in the fridge. I would have the kids' clothes laid out every day, right? What they were going to wear the next day. I mean, it was ridiculous. And it only took a few trips that none of that got done. And I had to just come home, and instead of being upset by the fact that none of the groceries were cooked that I had made, none of the meals had been cooked that I'd planned, and the kids were wearing crazy clothes that didn't match, and those neat, cute little outfits I'd laid out were still sitting there, I had to just let it go,
Adjust.
right? Adjust. You're right. Be flexible, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. Well, things don't always turn out the way we expect. And I think when we're delivering a message that's so focused on what's important to us, we can lose our audience or the expectations that we have of them becomes inconsistent with what we're looking for. And when that happens, we get frustrating and then it becomes an interaction relationship kind of issue. So a lot of different kinds of things can come about, I think, when we lose sight of our audience and their expectations.
Yeah, and I agree. I think sometimes we get so connected to a technical skill or a comfort zone skill that things change. You said flexibility earlier. I think we have to be nimble. We have a lot of people who their jobs outgrow them because they get really locked into this one skill and they have a hard time adapting to new ways of working or new ways of doing things. When it comes to EQ, one of the skills does start to decline as we age, and that one is flexibility. So we have to fight against that when we're young and try to remain as flexible as possible because, you know, science is working against us on that one.
Exactly. So we want to continue to grow in terms of our knowledge data-wise, whatever the subject matter is. But we want to be able to blend that with other aspects of what's going on around us.
Excellent. So, in a nutshell, to avoid this trap, I would say resist the urge to give answers too quickly. Really work to let other people do their own critical thinking. And hopefully remain open-minded to new ways of doing things, both for yourself and let other people do it their way. Be patient and tolerant with that. And then I really liked what you said, Steve. Work to have breadth of knowledge. So you have a wide knowledge on a variety of topics instead of a deep knowledge in just one or two.
Right. We don't lose our authenticity. We simply stretch ourselves to the point where we become better at who we want to be and become more interesting to the people around us.
Great topic today. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Until next time, thanks for joining us today on the Ego versus EQ and You podcast. If you liked this episode, be sure to follow us or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please share our show with others. For questions or future topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@jenshirkani.com. Until next time, keep using your EQ and show ego who's boss.